everybody, hope you're well. So this video was requested by MissBunny and OMB123. So in this video I'm going to be focusing on building a reputation on Howrse. This is going to cover a couple of different areas. It is going to be quite a general overview. So I'll be covering things such as getting further up in the rankings, getting better known on the game, building that reputation, maybe getting page visits, your popularity in other rankings, or maybe your general ranking, or maybe even get into a top team, or building your own team. So if you're looking more specific videos, I have one on how to recruit players to a team, one on teamwork. I have one on popularity rankings, getting page visits, getting congratulations, improving your own general ranking, and also a video about the general ranking formula if you want to know how to work it out. So those are more specific videos. So now we're going to sort of get into this. And I am going to talk about my own experiences as well with this to give a bit of context. But for example, one of the questions I was asked was, if you were, say, for example, going to start off a new breeding project and maybe it was for a new breed coming out, and there was other players on the game who are more experienced and you're setting up a team and you want to be able to attract people to your team, but you've got other players here with a higher ranking, maybe a better reputation, and maybe people will be more attracted to go to their team than they are to go to yours. So if you want to start off this team and compete against those higher ranking players who have a lot more experience, then that can be quite daunting because, that is kind of a scary situation. You're going to have to deal with somebody that has more experience, hypothetically. So that could be quite frustrating because you might be feeling like all your hard work and effort might be for nothing, and you might feel like you're not going to become successful in a team. So if you're feeling like you need to be able to compete with that, then there's a couple of things you can do. I'm going to kind of talk about this a little bit. So what I'm first going to do is I'm going to talk about my own experience. So I started back in 2008 in international, and I was an independent breeder, so I just went and bred horses, little random ones, and it was mainly Connemara's. So after a bit of time I became friends with people, and as I made those friends, so that was chatting in the forums or just generally over PMs and so forth, so I made a couple of contacts, and one player who I met who was in one of the top teams at the time, she wasn't one of the highest ranking people in the game. She was somewhere in the 200s or whatever, and she was exceptionally knowledgeable. Okay, she had a huge amount of knowledge, and she shared that with me, and she started to teach me things, show me how to be more efficient and so forth. And then, because we'd become quite good friends and she was teaching me things, we decided to work on a project together. So that was whenever we made the original Artemis. And then we decided, whenever UK came along in January 2011, that we wanted to be the best Connemara's in UK server. And that was our goal. And we wanted to do that. So we worked really hard and it paid off in the end. So that was a situation where I met somebody, I made a connection with that person, became friends with them, and they shared knowledge with me, and I was interested in learning, so obviously they were more inclined to show me things and how to do things. So my advice in general is, even if you're trying to build up your own team or your own reputation, you need to build contacts, because you can't build a reputation on your own. You have to have people talking to you, you have to make friends, talk to people in the forums, build relationships with people, because those are important and those give standing to your reputation. So, for example, I started off in the Black Pearl forum, nothing to do with breeding horses whatsoever, but I made a lot of friends in there who eventually became my teammates. It was to do the Black Pearl forum, if you're familiar with it, is purely to do with artwork for the Black Pearl, for submitting golden apple quotes and Howrse Res and so forth. So I went into somewhere that I was interested in, and I met a lot of other people who had similar interests, and I was building upon that. So I think as a second point, I would say find people with a common interest with you, or even a common interest in a certain breed if you're going to go work with a team, because you're going to have bad and good days on Howrse. And you need to know you can rely on these people, especially if they're going to be in a team with you, or even just, be there to support you during difficult times. And I think never be afraid to ask people sometimes if they have an interest in something, because the worst case scenario is to say no or they don't answer you. Because I had plenty of occasions where I messaged, teams on international It wasn't very often that I did, but there was one particular breed I had a great interest in, and I messaged the team, and it was a top team, and I never got an answer. And the reason they didn't answer me, I don't know, but that was their choice, and they made decisions at that time, and that was probably based on my ranking and different things. Or maybe they were just busy and they didn't answer. There's lots of different reasons for that. But there's no harm in asking. I mean, as I said, they either just don't answer or you get a no. And if they're rude to you, then you can just report that. So, but most of the time they'll not be rude. And I think another point is to expect more rejections than success. And that's pretty key when I started off, as I said. And I know this is a really horrible thing to say, but I know that at one point I was completely unknown. No one cared who I was, and I often found that I was overlooked, especially on internationals. Internationals massive. There's a huge amount of people on there, and it's very hard to make a reputation for yourself. And I think you have to look out for yourself and be proactive, because no other player is going to help you build your reputation or going to make you succeed at your goal. You have to be the one doing it. So I think then the next thing I would say is to kind of be careful. And when I say be careful, there's a couple of things. Is don't nag people. One of the things I think is actually kind of dangerous for people to do is if you go around pestering every player that you can find to join your team or to join their team, that kind of tends to spread. Like, bad things that happen on Howrse tend to spread faster than good. And that's the truth. If somebody, for example, messaged somebody and said something really nasty, or was in some way doing things that were negatively impacting, let's say, a team, for example, that's quite likely to go around Howrse very quick and people talk. So you have to be careful of what you do. Don't be going out and sending everybody chainmail or spam or whatever, because they're not going to appreciate that and they're going to make it known. So, and the other thing, and this is more to do really with if you're making your own team and you're recruiting people to your team. So say, for example, you've done all this, you've built contacts, you've got people with a common interest or goal, and you've got those people with you. One thing to be very careful of, I think, is people who tend to jump around a lot, because I tend to find that there will be some people who will have a really long VIP team history list of how many teams have been. Like, I'm talking excessive amounts. And I'm not talking about maybe 3 or 4. I'm talking about, ones that are really, really, really long, like the length of your arm. And whenever I see something like that, and I think this would be true with a lot of other people if they were like trying to gauge, or if you were trying to look at somebody's team history, if they've been in a lot of teams, and I mean, like, we're talking big figures here, it makes you question is whether they're going to actually be really dedicated or not. Because if I see somebody in a few teams who's working really, really hard, then I can say that person is going to probably put the same amount of effort into this team. But if I see somebody that's been in 40 teams in the last 6 months, I'm going to be like, I think they're just kind of hopping in and out of different teams, and maybe they just get bored, maybe they're really not interested, maybe they just haven't maybe found the right team for themselves. But 40 teams is quite a lot. It's things like that. I think you have to be to a certain degree wary of that. And I would also say, if you're recruiting people for your own team, I personally would avoid people as VIP fillers solely, unless you've worked with them before and you know that they're completely reliable. Because you have to take into consideration that if you're taking on a VIP filler just to expand the spaces in your team, and they're not actively bluffing or not actively involved in the team in any way, they can have access to your team sales, your covers and so forth. You have to be aware of that and think about that, because it wouldn't be very good if you just took somebody on based on the word and they said, I can be a VIP filler for your team. You took them on, for example, when you were starting off this new breed, and let's say worst case scenario, you had 5 other people that joined who were bluffing, and you had this VIP filler, and then the VIP filler left and had taken covers and then started their own team. I'm pretty sure you and the rest of your teammates would be pretty annoyed at that. So I think you have to kind of like be smart about it and be, thinking about these things. So I would avoid those unless you're people that and you can rely on them and you've worked with them before and there's no doubt in your mind that they'll be okay. And one other thing I'm going to mention this, and I kind of forgot about this before, was there are some people I would be like wary about when you're building your reputation. And the reason I mentioned this is I had a very, very bad experience a couple of years ago whenever I was still kind of building up my own reputation on the game. one player came along who I ended up doing a lot for. Now, this is going back many, many years ago, but I ended up helping them do a huge amount of stuff. But it got to the point that I was doing everything, I was doing all of the work, and I was getting no benefit from doing it. In the end, it actually turned around and it actually really negatively impacted me. So there was the realization there that you should be very careful and not let people use you and walk over you. And I think that was a very important learning experience for me. And I think if you can avoid it yourself, I would advise it. And don't use other people. Don't, because I think that's one of the nastiest things people can do is use other people for their own gain. It's not nice. And I really, really frown upon that. So that's just something be wary of, and don't be that person that uses other people, because it's not nice. So I think really overall, whenever you're trying to get your name out there and you're going to get known for the right reasons, whether that's being a good blupper or being reliable or trustworthy, for example, because at the end of the day, word of mouth on Howrse does spread, and players will hear that good about what you do, and it will take more time, because I think that good tends to take longer than bad. Bad goes round really quickly, whereas good doesn't. And there's loads of people out there who do really lovely things and help loads of people, and nobody ever hears about it. And that's like kind of sad. It is kind of sad that happens, but that's the truth. And something that bad that happens just spreads so much more quickly. So I think if you want people to be more inclined to work with you, you need to kind of be proactive from the start. Don't wait until that new breed comes out to decide you're going to, breed it. Start preparing now. Be proactive. Get yourself in maybe a team now with a good reputation, and build that reputation within the team for yourself as well. And that will help in the long run. In order to show other players that you're worth considering instead of a top player or a top team, you need to show them. You need to show that you're a hard worker or you're dedicated, things like that. So I think if you can get yourself into a top team now, I would advise that. Or even just at least collaborate with other people on other projects. It doesn't have to necessarily be breeding top horses or anything. It could be breeding unicorns, breeding donkeys, even little things like just going in the forums and, like, as I said, talking about creations and things like that. So I think really, if you're starting your own team, there's always the risk of being overtaken, but sometimes it takes time to catch up. For example, I've known new teams that have come out, and let's say a team A starts out and they're all really top players and they blow up like crazy, and team B, slower pace, they're not, as experienced, but they're kind of keep going, and they're tenacious about it. They don't give up. So team A burns themselves out from blopping like completely crazy. So team B, although they've been slower, they've paced themselves, and they eventually overtake A. And it could take a long time, but that is possible. And I don't think anybody should ever feel it's silly if they have a goal. Never feel that you have to justify your goal. Just be yourself. Be honest, and at the end of the day, be respectful towards other people, because if you're not respectful towards other people, why should other people respect you? And I think that's what it comes down to. I kind of hope this helped in some way. I'm sorry if it was a wee bit rambly. If anybody has any future questions, feel free to leave them below the video. Anyway, guys, thank you to MissBunny and Owenboot123 for requesting the video. I hope you had a lovely day.